The air in the courtroom was so thick you could choke on it. On the right sat Captain James Walker, his dress blues pressed to razor-sharp perfection, his chest heavy with rows of colorful medals that glinted under the fluorescent lights. He looked like the poster boy for American heroism, but his eyes were fixed in a wide, glassy stare as if he'd just seen a ghost. On the left sat Jay. He wasn't in uniform. He wore a simple gray suit, sitting behind a nameplate that coldly labeled him as Defendant Jay. He kept his expression stoic, his calloused hands folded, feeling the weight of the police officer standing guard behind him. To the jury, he was just another statistic. To Walker, he was a loose end that needed to be tied off with a prison sentence. "The prosecution rests," the district attorney announced. The judge leaned forward. "Does the defense have any witnesses to call?" Jay's lawyer stood, her voice cutting through the tension. "Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls David Miller." Captain Walker's smug composure didn't just crack, it disintegrated. His jaw dropped. His face went ghostly pale. As the heavy oak doors creaked open, the quiet shuffle of footsteps echoed through the chamber. A thin man in an ill-fitting suit walked forward, his hands trembling but his eyes locked on Walker. The room went dead silent. Before we dive deeper into this courtroom battle, hit subscribe because stories like this don't get resolved the way you think, and you won't want to miss what happens when the truth finally surfaces. The fluorescent lights hummed above as Jay wiped engine grease from his hands, the familiar scent of motor oil filling the small garage that had become his entire world. 48 hours before everything would change, he existed in this pocket of quiet, replacing brake pads, rotating tires, avoiding the news that played on the small television mounted in the corner. That night, the screen showed Captain Walker in dress blues, accepting the Hero of the Year award with practiced humility. The audience rose in standing ovation as he spoke of sacrifice, of brotherhood, of the burden of command. His smile never quite reached his eyes, but the cameras loved him anyway. Behind the podium, medals glinted under studio lights: Bronze Star, Silver Star, Purple Heart. Each one told a story. Some of those stories were even true. Jay turned away, focusing on the honest work of fixing what was broken. A '98 Corolla needed new brake pads. A Ford pickup had a transmission leak. Simple problems with simple solutions. Not like the problems that followed him home from the desert, the ones that had no fix, only management. The garage was his sanctuary, a place where results were measurable and trust was earned through competence, not rank. He didn't watch the rest of Walker's speech. He already knew how it would end, with thunderous applause, with Walker's hand over his heart, with another chapter added to a legend built on graves and silence. Jay locked up the garage at 9, went home to his small apartment, and tried to sleep. In 2 days, Walker would come for him. In 2 days, the quiet life he'd built would shatter like glass. Walker came after dark, his rental car purring into the garage just before closing. Jay heard it before he saw it: the expensive engine, the deliberate timing. When Walker stepped out, he was alone, wearing civilian clothes that probably cost more than Jay made in a month. The conversation was brief, transactional. $500,000. A new start somewhere far away, maybe Montana, maybe Oregon, somewhere quiet where a man could disappear. All Jay had to do was sign a non-disclosure agreement, take the money, and forget what happened in Red Valley. Forget the screams. Forget the men left behind. Forget that Walker's medals were bought with other people's blood. When Jay refused, something shifted in Walker's expression, a coldness that Jay recognized from the desert, the look Walker got right before he made decisions that other men would have to live with. Walker stepped closer, voice dropping to a whisper only they could hear, speaking words designed to provoke, to wound. He mentioned Jay's mother, his service record, the psychiatric evaluation that almost kept him from deploying. The first punch came from reflex, from years of buried rage finally breaking surface. Jay's knuckles connected with Walker's jaw, and for one brief moment, there was satisfaction. Then he saw Walker smile, saw the phone already positioned on the workbench, red light blinking. Recording everything. Walker's 911 call was perfect. Panicked but coherent. A decorated veteran attacked by a former subordinate. Please send help. He's unstable. He kept saying something about the war. I'm bleeding. Please hurry. By the time the sirens arrived, Walker had arranged himself carefully, visible injuries, torn shirt, the perfect victim. Jay stood with his hands raised, engine grease still under his fingernails, knowing he'd walked straight into a trap designed specifically for him. The processing felt like drowning. Fingerprints, photographs, the clang of steel doors closing with mechanical finality. Each step stripped away another layer of the person Jay had rebuilt himself into over the past 3 years. By the time they locked him in the high-security cell, he was just a number again, just like in the army. The cell was smaller than his garage office and infinitely colder. Concrete walls, steel toilet, a thin mattress that smelled of industrial detergent and decades of desperation. Through the narrow window, he could see the city lights, the world continuing without him, indifferent to his fate. Sarah appeared the next morning, a public defender with tired eyes and too many case files. She introduced herself while flipping through paperwork, her tone suggesting she'd already accepted this as another losing battle. Another broke client, another case she'd plead out to avoid trial. But then she sat down and actually looked at him. And when Jay started to speak about Red Valley, about what really happened in the desert 3 years ago, she stopped writing and started listening. Jay told her about the ambush, about the orders Walker gave when command said extraction was 12 hours out. About the 3 wounded men Walker declared tactically unsalvageable. About how Walker called in the airstrike on their position to cover the withdrawal, knowing full well those men were still breathing. About how Jay went back anyway. Sarah's pen hovered over her legal pad. You disobeyed a direct order in a combat zone. I couldn't leave them, Jay said simply. Miller was 19 years old. He was bleeding out, calling for his mother. I carried him 8 miles through hostile territory. And Walker reported you for this? Walker reported Miller as Kia. Put himself in for a silver star for the withdrawal. The whole thing got classified under operational security. Jay leaned forward. I kept quiet because I thought it was over. But Walker can't let it go. He can't risk anyone finding out the truth. Sarah closed her notebook slowly. For the first time in 3 years of public defense work, she thought she might actually be representing an innocent man. Within hours, the footage went viral. Someone leaked it to the media, probably Walker himself, or someone on his team. The video showed everything Walker needed it to show: Jay throwing the first punch, Walker stumbling back, the veteran hero defending himself against unprovoked violence. The headlines wrote themselves. Decorated captain attacked by former subordinate. Hero of the year assaulted in random act of violence. Veterans PTSD turns violent. The story had everything modern media loved: a clear villain, a sympathetic victim, and footage that seemed to tell the complete story in 30 seconds. Walker's tearful testimony at the bail hearing became the centerpiece. He spoke haltingly, touching his bruised jaw for emphasis, describing how he'd gone to Jay's garage to check on an old friend only to face unexpected violence. I think the war broke something in him, Walker said, his voice cracking at precisely the right moment. I just wanted to help. The gallery murmured sympathetically. The judge denied bail, citing flight risk and danger to the community. Jay watched from the defendant's table as his character was dismantled piece by piece, transformed from veteran to villain in the space of a single hearing. Social media exploded. Jay's military photo appeared beside his mugshot, the transformation from soldier to criminal complete in the public imagination. Comment sections filled with rage, with calls for maximum sentencing, for justice against the man who dared raise his hand against America's finest. Former service members who'd never met either man weighed in, choosing sides based on rank and medals. Once a captain, always a captain, one popular post read. The chain of command doesn't end when you take off the uniform. A veterans advocacy group issued a statement condemning Jay's actions. A morning talk show devoted a segment to veteran violence and whether the military was doing enough to address PTSD. Walker appeared via satellite, humble and forgiving, saying he hoped Jay would get the help he needed. Sarah watched it all from her cramped office, taking notes. The narrative was airtight, self-reinforcing, designed to make any defense seem like denial. But somewhere in Walker's perfect performance, she sensed something wrong, the practiced cadence, the calculated emotion. She'd seen enough liars to recognize the professional ones. Sarah spent 3 sleepless nights reviewing Jay's military records, cross-referencing them with official casualty reports and medal citations. The documents told a clean story, too clean. Every loose end tied up, every timeline perfect, every witness statement aligned. Then she found it, buried in medical archives marked, confidential, a discharge order for Private First Class David Miller, dated 3 weeks after Red Valley. The paperwork showed medical evacuation to Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany, then stateside transfer to Walter Reed, then administrative discharge for injuries sustained in combat. The official Red Valley casualty reports listed Miller as Kia, killed in action, body recovered, death confirmed by Commanding Officer Captain James Walker. Sarah spread both documents across her desk, photographing them with her phone. A man couldn't be both dead and discharged. Someone was lying, and lies this big required institutional support. Someone had buried Miller in the paperwork, created a ghost to hide the truth. When she brought the discrepancy to Jay, he sat silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. I carried Miller 8 miles through hostile territory. Found a local family that hid him in their compound. Called in a favor with a medevac crew that wasn't supposed to be in that sector. They extracted him off books, no official record. Why? Sarah asked. Because if Walker knew Miller survived, he'd find a way to finish what the Taliban started. Jay's hands clenched. Miller saw everything. Heard Walker order the airstrike. Heard him tell command that all wounded were Kia. Miller's testimony would have ended Walker's career. So you saved him and hid him. I saved him and gave him a chance to disappear. Told him to never contact me, never come forward, never let Walker know he was breathing. I thought it was enough. Jay looked up. Where is he now? Sarah pulled out her phone, showing him the discharge address, a rural route in northern Idaho, near the Canadian border. I need to find him, she said. And I need him to testify. He won't, Jay said quietly. He's been running for 3 years. Walker made sure he knew what happens to people who talk. Then I need to convince him, Sarah said, that staying silent means Walker wins. Again. The cabin sat at the end of a logging road, hours from civilization, accessible only by 4-wheel drive through terrain that didn't welcome strangers. Sarah's rental car bottomed out twice before she reached the clearing where a small structure stood among the pines. Miller opened the door with a hunting rifle in his hands and fear in his eyes. He was thinner than his service photos, beard unkempt, the kind of gaunt that came from years of looking over his shoulder. You need to leave, he said before Sarah could introduce herself. I'm Jay's attorney. He's on trial for assaulting Captain Walker. The rifle lowered slightly. Jay hit him. Walker provoked it. Set him up. He's facing 5 years. Sarah stayed on the porch, hands visible, voice steady. I found your discharge papers. I know what happened in Red Valley. Miller's face went pale. You need to leave. Now. If Walker finds out you came here. He's already won if you don't speak up. He's destroying Jay the same way he tried to destroy you, by making the truth sound crazy, by turning heroes into villains. Sarah took a careful step forward. How many more people does he get to hurt before someone stops him? They spent 3 hours on that porch. Miller talked haltingly, his hands shaking as he described the ambush, the wounds, Walker's cold calculation as he called in coordinates that would kill his own men. He looked right at me, Miller whispered. Told me I was already dead. That if I somehow survived, he'd make sure no one believed me. I believe you, Sarah said. And a jury will too. Juries believe medals. They believe captains. They don't believe, Miller gestured at himself, at the isolated cabin, at 3 years of hiding. They don't believe this. They'll believe you and Jay together. 2 witnesses. Medical records that prove Walker filed false reports. A pattern of lies that unravels his entire story. Sarah leaned forward. He's counting on you staying silent. That's his only advantage. Miller was quiet for a long time, staring at the trees. Finally, he went inside and packed a single bag. The drive back was silent except for his occasional whispers. He said he'd find me. He said no one would believe me. Sarah didn't have answers, only hope that the truth might, for once, be enough. Do you think Miller will actually show up to testify? Or is Walker going to win this one too? Drop your prediction in the comments. Some of you might be reading Walker's playbook better than his own lawyers. The prosecution built their case like constructing a building: foundation of physical evidence, walls of expert testimony, roof of Walker's devastating performance. The assistant district attorney was young, ambitious, playing to cameras that had turned a simple assault into national news. The physical evidence came first: photographs of Walker's bruised face, medical reports documenting a fractured cheekbone, security footage showing Walker's arrival. Then the video, 30 seconds showing Jay throwing the first punch, Walker stumbling backward, unmistakable aggression. Expert witnesses followed. A forensic analyst explained injury patterns. A psychiatrist testified about PTSD and veteran violence without ever examining Jay, speaking in generalities that painted combat veterans as potential time bombs. The jury's expressions grew more certain with each witness. Then Walker took the stand in dress uniform, medals arranged in perfect rows, bruising visible on his jaw. His testimony was masterful, humble, pained, reluctant to criticize a fellow veteran. I went to check on Jay because I was worried, Walker said steadily. I'd heard he was struggling. I thought I could help, connect him with resources. What happened when you arrived? Walker's hand rose to his jaw. At first, fine. We talked about the garage. Then I mentioned guys from our unit, and something changed in his eyes. He started talking about Red Valley, about decisions made. I tried calming him down, but, Walker paused, gathering himself. He hit me. No warning. Just rage. The gallery murmured. The jury leaned forward, captivated. Walker played it perfectly, not vengeful, just sad. A disappointed brother trying to understand inexplicable violence. Sarah cross-examined carefully, but Walker had prepared for every question. Yes, alone. Yes, after dark. Yes, he understood how it looked, but he was simply helping a troubled veteran. His answers were reasonable, compassionate, impossible to shake. When Walker stepped down, Sarah felt the case slipping away. The jury had decided. They were just waiting for permission to convict. By day 8, the atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted from uncertainty to inevitability. The prosecution rested with a confident flourish, their case a seamless narrative of violence and accountability. Sarah called her witnesses, character references from garage customers, a psychiatrist who'd actually examined Jay, but they felt like whispers against Walker's booming credibility. The jury avoided Jay's eyes during deliberations breaks, a tell that every defense attorney learned to read. The foreman, a retired accountant, had stopped taking notes days ago. The verdict was forming like storm clouds, dark and inescapable. The judge reviewed her notes with the careful attention of someone preparing to impose a heavy sentence. She'd already indicated that if the jury convicted on the assault charge, she was considering the upper range of sentencing guidelines. This court takes violence against veterans very seriously, she'd said during a sidebar, especially violence that appears rooted in mental health issues the defendant refuses to address. Sarah's closing argument was passionate but felt like shouting into wind. She pointed out the inconsistencies. Why would Walker go alone, at night, to confront someone he thought was unstable? Why was his phone positioned perfectly to capture the incident? Why did he refuse to answer direct questions about what he said to provoke Jay? The prosecution wants you to believe this was random violence, Sarah told the jury. But nothing about this was random. Captain Walker came to that garage with a purpose, with a plan, and with a recording device already running. Ask yourselves, what was he really afraid of? The jury looked unconvinced. One woman in the back row was already nodding along with the prosecution's objections before they were even voiced. During the lunch recess, Sarah sat in the courthouse cafeteria, staring at her phone. Miller had gone dark 2 days ago, spooked by something, maybe a car that drove past his hotel too slowly, maybe just the weight of years of fear catching up. She'd left 17 voicemails. He'd answered none. The afternoon session was scheduled to begin closing arguments. After that, jury instructions. After that, deliberation and verdict. Sarah had maybe 3 hours before Jay's fate was sealed. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, 3 words that changed everything. I'm in the building. The rear courtroom doors opened as the judge prepared to call the afternoon session. Miller walked forward, each step heavy with years of hiding. His hands visibly shook. Sarah stood. Your Honor, the defense calls David Miller. After brief arguments at the bench, the judge allowed it. Miller took the stand, identifying himself, David Miller, Private First Class, United States Army, matching the discharge papers Sarah had found. Mr. Miller, were you in Red Valley on April 3, 3 years ago? Yes. Miller's testimony came in careful sentences. He described the ambush, the casualties, Walker's decision when extraction was delayed. He said we couldn't defend the position with wounded. Ordered us to fall back, leave them behind, said they were tactically unsalvageable. The courtroom went silent. I was hit during withdrawal. Couldn't keep pace. Captain Walker looked at me and said I was already dead. Miller's voice caught. Jay came back. After the unit withdrew, after Walker called in airstrike coordinates on our position, Jay came through the bombardment and carried me 8 miles. He saved my life. And after you recovered? I was told to disappear. That if Walker knew I survived, he'd bury the truth. Miller looked directly at Walker. He got medals for that operation. Silver Star for heroic withdrawal. But he didn't save us. He left us to die. Sarah asked carefully, can you identify who ordered you abandoned? Miller pointed at Walker with a trembling finger. Captain James Walker didn't get those medals for saving us. He got them for silencing us. Jay is the only reason I'm breathing. The courtroom erupted. Military police moved swiftly, placing Walker in handcuffs as the judge demanded order. 90 minutes later, charges against Jay were dismissed. Miller's testimony had destroyed Walker's credibility entirely. Outside, Jay stood on the courthouse steps, face turned toward the sun. Miller waited by a car, still looking like he wanted to run but standing his ground. Jay walked over. I'm sorry I hid, Miller said quietly. You survived, Jay replied. That's all I wanted. They stood together in sunlight, finally free from shadows that followed them home from war. Behind them, Walker was led away, his legend exposed as fiction. The sun felt warm on Jay's face. For the first time in 3 years, he could breathe. If this story hit different, smash that like button and subscribe, because the next one digs even deeper into the shadows where heroes and villains aren't always who they seem, and it's already waiting for you.